Hello, this is Watch All About with another watch review, and in this review we're looking at a Formex, which is a brand that I hadn't heard of recently, but apparently they've been around for a while, uh, since the 90s. But just recently they've had a complete revamp and gone completely online. And this is one of their very new watches, the AS1100. Now this is available for £1,078 in this version, or you can go with a titanium and stainless steel bracelet for a little bit more, £1,195. Now I am going to say from the outset, I haven't been this impressed with a watch for a very long time, so I'm sure you're going to imagine the kind of review that's going to continue. But for this price, it is a very, very lovely watch, but we'll go into closer detail. So let's think about some specs then. The main reason why it's so expensive is, first of all, it has a ETA 7750 mechanical chronograph movement. It also has a whole lot of carbon fibre and titanium in it. So we have a carbon fibre dial, we have carbon fibre sides of the case, and then we have this titanium system of the case, which actually has a patented case suspension system. As you can see here, we have this paint. If I get it in focus, we have this patented case suspension like so. So we have a number of pretty cool little features. All the titanium is grade 2 titanium. So for the price of the watch, just over £1,000, we're talking about quite a lot of watch for the money, especially when you consider the very base rate of ETA 7750 mechanical chronograph watches, easily 600 or 700 for a half decent one. So really realistically, a decent one, you're looking at around £1,500 realistically. So let's talk about the specs then. It's definitely not a small watch, and it is definitely a specific style, a racing style. So if you don't like large watches or racing style watches, then this obviously isn't the watch for you. But we have a 46.5mm diameter case, relatively thin at 14mm height, which is quite nice, and then a pretty humongous lug-to-lug length of 53.5mm. As I mentioned before, the ETA 7750 is the movement, and I've put that on my Lepsy watch scope, and that is incredibly a 2 seconds a day accuracy, which is well within COSC specific, so that is really impressive. Obviously they either it's come out of the factory that well, or they've done a little bit of tinkering to make it that accurate, so that's nice. We have a good weight of 134 grams, so for a mechanical chronograph that is really light. That's most likely because of the amount of titanium in the case, opting for that rather than steel, so that naturally is lighter. We have a 22mm lug width, so a fairly decent width for the strap, and a 100-meter water resistance. So it's not crazy water resistant. You probably don't want to go deep sea diving with it, but it's capable of taking a gentle dunk here and there. Okay, so let's talk about each separate element one by one. So let's start with the dial. As you can see, we have a very definite carbon fibre main aspect to it, and then the subdials are set within that with quite a reflective, shiny, polished kind of feel to them. We also have loomed hour markers dotted around the dial as well. If I just reset the hands a little bit out of the way, you can see the logo located at 2, and then a very nicely done date and day indicator. We'll have a look at that in closer detail in a bit, but it's something so simple, but it's been done to a very high standard very nicely. The loom on all these elements are pretty outstanding as well. Very quick to charge, and it glows brightly for a very long time. I'm trying to see if you can sort of see it in there. Not really, but it is very impressive. Have a look at the pictures in the written review. The hands, nice, simple but bold and easy to read design, quite like a pilot's watch almost. And in fact, the whole aesthetics of it is almost halfway between a racing and a pilot's watch. You see like the main thick bezel and these 4 points here. It could be almost like a clock in a cockpit, if you will. So the chronograph seconds hand actually has two ends of it. So the top end you can use as your main seconds hand, and then the bottom half of it has the red point, which you can then use for your tachymeter, which is quite an interesting way of doing it, so you have the best of both worlds. Okay, so well designed, perfectly executed. Yeah, really impressed with the quality of the dial. You know, when you look at it, you can tell that it's absolutely perfectly formed. Moving on to the case then. First thing, as soon as I opened the box, I was absolutely mesmerized by the Sapphire Crystal with the anti-reflective coating. In normal conditions, we can see a little bit of reflection here with the blue tint on the camera, but in normal conditions with the naked eye, it's just unbelievably clear, and it's like the same kind of quality as you'd see on Omega, for instance. So it really knocks out all of the watches completely out the water in the same price range. And I always feel that a decent anti-reflective coating, a decent crystal, makes a watch a good it makes the difference between a great watch and an outstanding watch. And in this instance, it is exactly that. To the naked eye, it's just glorious to see. You'll be able to see in some of the pictures just how clear that crystal is, but at most angles, it's just they've done a really good job here, and it's very high quality. Moving on to the rest of the case, very complex, but very nicely executed as well. We have a number of screws here, so we have screws on the side for the of the lugs for the strap. We have screws for the case suspension system as well. So quite an aggressive feel to it, and we have this nice little suspension as well. I mean, it doesn't, whether it actually makes much difference or not, or whether it's more of a gimmick. Either way, I really like it, and I think it's a very impressive piece of machining to do it in such a decent way. Moving on to this side, we have the pushers and the crown. They have like a bit more of a plasticky finish to them. So they are metal, but they have like a finish, a paint which is quite shiny in finish. One thing to note is the fact that these pushers do have a little bit of wiggle to them. Now that is designed to be that way, if you can see, mainly because they have to be able to take the angle of the suspension system. So as you can see, when the suspension system is depressed, that has to have that little bit of wiggle to be able to control that. So just be aware of that. I mean, it hasn't bothered me, but some people it may bother, so it's just something you need to be aware of. The crown, it's just a push-pull crown. Nothing crazy exciting about it, but it's nice and big and thick, so it's it's easy to wind up if you need to, or set the watch. So looking at the case back, nice big slab of titanium with a exhibition window with our Formex logo emblazoned on the rotor. Very nicely done, just printed straight on it, and the movement, as you can imagine from an ETA, is pretty pristine, very nicely put together, and very clean, which is something you don't see very often at all with Chinese or Japanese movements. Sometimes they can be quite grubby. Well, mainly the Chinese movements, to be honest. We also have some details etched around the outside, so that's all very nicely done, as you'd expect. So moving on to the strap, we have like a textured top to it. It is a leather strap, but this top doesn't feel particularly leathery to me. It's probably the bit that I'm most not bothered about, so perhaps the titanium and steel bracelet is a better option to go for. But obviously with 22mm lugs, you can literally put anything you want on it. It is well designed though, with the red and black, very racing, and it flows through from the design of the dial and case very nicely, and it really looks the part as well when it's on. Quite a standard buckle, quite a bulbous end bar, so easy to use. No machining or anything on it, so it doesn't have the logo or anything. But to be honest, it's not the end of the world. So that has some DLC coating as well to match certain elements of the case. Okay, so let's look at it in closer detail with the macro lens. So let's start off with the dial. So starting with the logo there and the day-date indicator, you can see there we have a nice level of finish and complexity for something so small. And if we look at the general carbon fibre finish of the dial as well, very nicely knitted together. And we have the sub-dials here at a lower level with their sort of polished kind of finish to them. Just give the crystal a bit of a wipe. Moving on to the hands, they have a polished finish to them as well, and a white tip for maximum legibility against the carbon fibre backdrop. And we have our loomed numerals, very accurately put in place and printed on. Looking at the rehaut, that has the tachymeter painted on. That's a brushed steel to it, which is nice to see. So moving on to the case then, here's the DLC bezel with quite a matte finish to it, and then we have our suspension system, so you can see that working away there. And then the other side, there we go. You can see this carbon fibre side to the case as well, and something you don't always see is a nice little red line under the bezel as well, which you can only see when the suspension is pushed down, which is a really nice little thing, and you can see the little bit sneaking out on top of the lugs as well. So here's the screw for the lugs either side, and then we come over here to the pushers with a very reflective finish to them, and the crown itself, nicely made, can't really complain, but it's got the kind of finish to it which does show fingerprints quite easily. So moving on to the case back, we have some details etched in the grey to titanium. Some more screws, putting them all in place, and then we have the movement. So we have Formex logo printed on the ETA 7750 rotor, and we can see it ticking away there nicely. So there's 25 joules. See if I can find the ETA logo. Sometimes you can see it hidden away, but sometimes you can see it down there. Don't think I'm going to be able to get it today though, unfortunately. Okay, so just moving on to the strap. There's the Formex on the underside, etched logo. Here's the top. So we have this kind of canvasy kind of top to it, red stitching, and then here's the buckle, sort of like a matte DLC coating. Okay, so from the moment I opened the watch box with the Formex AS1100 1100 in it, I was pretty impressed, to be honest. Only two things to keep in mind. That is the wiggle on the pushers for the case suspension, but also the the top of the leather strap feels quite interesting, but that's not really necessarily a negative. Apart from that, what an outstanding watch it is. For just over £1,000, I'm really struggling to think of a better mechanical chronograph watch. Obviously, it is a very specific design, in the racing kind of theme, and also it is very large, so some people may not particularly like it, but those who do, I've been really impressed with that. You know, almost blown away, and it's just so nice to look at. There's so many aspects to it, you know, with the complexity of the case, the complexity of the dial, something about having a mechanical chronograph as well with all the subdials. I really love that kind of thing, and just the anti-reflective coating on the crystal is to die for. So for a watch costing this much, it's been really mightily impressive. Definitely takes other watches, gives them a good run for their money. The only other one I can think of really at the top of my head is the Christopher Ward Trident chronograph, but that's £1.5 grand, so you know, easily 400 plus more pounds, which is a lot at the end of the day. So for just over £1,000, I've been really impressed with the Formex AS1100. So if this is your kind of thing, then I would highly recommend it, because you really won't be disappointed with it whatsoever. So this was the Formex AS1100, and that's what it's all about.